So this video is on integer programming. So I'll use an example in order to illustrate what integer programming is all about. Okay, so for example, you have been given this question. They tell you the objective function z is equal to 3x1 plus 2x2. Then they tell you have a certain constraint of 6x1 plus 8x2 greater than or equal to 20. Okay, so there can be even a scenario where you just have one constraint or even two, but the principle is just the same. So in my video, I want to just use one constraint. Then maybe in other videos I'll try with maybe more than one. Yeah, so imagine you have this kind of question and then they write these details: x1 comma x2 should be greater than equal to 0, and then they put this statement: all integers. How do you approach such a question? So remember, this is integer programming. An integer, if you recall, is any number, any whole number without having any decimals. That's what an integer is. So an integer can be a positive or a negative whole number. Yeah, that's what an integer is. So with that in mind, you have that knowledge as you approach this new topic of integer programming. So I'll just erase this. I'm sure when you'll be rewinding behind this, when you rewind this video, you'll be able to see the question again. So okay, so you have those constraints, like the first constraint, which is was it 6x1 plus 8x2 greater than but equal to 20. So in this case, how it is that when you've been given a question like this, you first of all solve it like any normal linear programming question. And what I mean by that is that if you've been given constraints like this, the first thing you do is that you just solve it like the normal graphical method that you know from the beginning of linear programming, the same graphical method. And how do we do that? We find the intercepts of each constraint. In this case, we only have one constraint, which is the one you're seeing on the screen. So finding the intercepts, if you look at this, you can just say, well, okay, when x1 is 0, what is x2 equal to? It will be equal to 20 over 8. I'll just take the fractional form because I know there will be some decimals, but it's up to you. You can put the fraction or you can put the decimal of what I've just put there. Then you can also say when x2 is 0, what is x1 equal to? I'll just again take the fractional form, which is 20 over 6, comma 0. Okay, so you have those values at this point. Now you go and plot, because we said you just solve it like any normal graphical linear programming question. That's how you start a question on integer programming. So now you have those constraints in mind. So let's go and plot. So you would have your graph. There we go with our graph, that and that. Remember, this side is where your x2 should be, and then your x1 is on the that x-axis that we know. Okay, so now we are plotting the intercepts. 0, 20 over 8, which is as good as if you divide that, that's like 2.5 if I'm not mistaken. So you know what, okay, one of your intercepts is where on 2.5. So you know, you even indicate there. Sorry, let me just write that properly. Your 2.5 is one of your intercepts. You indicate a comma dot there. What about your next intercept? If you divide the other one, it was 20 over 6 divided by 0. If you divide that, it should give you a recurring 3.33333 and so on. So you know, okay, that it's somewhere between 3 point something, right? So you just say 3 point, okay, you put the Castellan scale 1, 2, and 3, 4. So you know it's just between 3 and 4, that same number, right? So you can do that and then connect the two lines, and you have done your graphical method just like that. Yeah, so now what do we do after this? So in a normal graphical in a normal linear programming graphical method, after you have drawn your graph, what do we look for? The corner points. First of all, this was less than but equal to, right? Meaning we are focusing on this region where I put my FR. The rest, this side, the outside, they are unwanted in this case. Yeah, this is the approach I personally take. I usually shade the unwanted region, and we're focusing on the FR region there, which is applying with a less than but equal to, and it's satisfying that rule. So now you have your feasible region, and try to get the corner points. So you might have point A, point B where there's like a 2.5, and then point C there where there's also that recurring number. So you put your coordinates, like A is equal to what? 0, 0. B is equal to 0, 2.5. What about C? C is equal to 3.33. We'll just round it off to 2 decimal places because it's recurring, what? 0. What do we do after this? We test the z function to see which one will give us what? The highest or the maximum, the most, because we're maximizing, by the way. Sorry, I just didn't mention that we are actually maximizing that function that we started with from the beginning of this video. So when we're maximizing, we test out the z values to see which one will bring the maximum point. So if you test the first one, z is equal to what? 0. The next one, z is equal to what? 5. And the last one here, our z is equal to 9.99. If you punch that on your calculator, yes, you should get 9.99, showing that point C produces the maximum point. And under normal graphical linear programming, this would have been our point, our optimal solution, the one we would always look for. So just after you have done that, remember, as at this point, integer programming has not yet kicked in, but it's a requirement to always start a question like this and putting out everything I've just highlighted in this video. Then now, what's the next step? Integer programming comes with a number of methods. But we'll focus mostly on 2 according to our syllabus. So those 2 are what they call enumeration. I'll spell it out. Let me just see what I can erase on this screen. Then just write that spelling of that word: enumeration. That's enumeration. It's a method for solving integer programming. Yeah. Then the other method is what they call branch and bound. Yeah. So they work interchangeably. Mind you, they will specify which method to go for. So let's get to it. Let's see enumeration first of all. How would you solve enumeration method? Because the way these methods come in, these ones which are attached to integer programming, they all start to work after you have solved it like a normal graphical linear programming question. That's why I said we always start it like it's just a normal LP problem which we even graph. Yeah. So like after you've now graphed, you have this solution on your graph. How does enumeration work? So for enumeration, how it works is that you'll be looking at your feasible region, which is there inside there, the feasible region. So enumeration takes coordinates that are within the region. Let me be explaining as well moving. Coordinates that are within the feasible region, not outside. So if you look at the feasible region, if you look along this x2 line, which is the y-axis, the highest number is 2.5, which belongs to the what? Feasible region. Now, as you're picking these coordinates, remember, as you're picking coordinates, you should always have like x, y, as usual, x, y. You pick an x value, y value, just like that. And our y in this case is like the x2. So, what we're going to do there is that if you look at, as we said, this axis there on the y, the highest is 2.5. On the x-axis, the highest is that recurring number 3.3, which belongs to the feasible region. Okay, so look at the first point there where a is 0, 0. Is 0, 0 within the feasible region? Yes, it is very much. You take note of it. So you put it aside somewhere. I'm just erasing some of these things. So you have the first point 0, 0. If you try another pointer, what about 0, 1? If you look at 1, 1 is this 0,1, meaning the 1 is on the y-axis. Is it still in the feasible region? Of course it is, right? It also qualifies as a point. You also take note of that. Next, we have another point. If you look at your graph again, 0,2. Is 0,2 a point there on your graph? Definitely. So in your feasible region, definitely it is, because it's also within the feasible region. The thing is, as you're picking these coordinates, they should be what? Whole numbers. Someone might ask, why haven't we picked the coordinate of 0,2.5? Because it's also within. The rule goes back to integers. We would have gone for that point. The only problem is that 2.5 is not an integer, it's a decimal number. So that is why in this case we do not pick that coordinate. So enumeration method does pick coordinates as we're doing, but the thing is that it only focuses on integers only. So like we've picked those. Let's go to the coordinates which are also aligned with this x-axis. If we check 1, 0, 1, 0 is there, right? It's within the feasible region. If you check, if I check another point, if I pick maybe if x1, my x1 is on the x-axis, if I pick it 2, 0 is within the feasible region, we accept, and it's also an integer. They are all whole numbers. 2,1 is this one. If I draw this line here, they're in the what? Feasible region. It's also a feasible point according to enumeration. If you check 2,2, it should be able to match. The thing is just that you have to draw these things to scale. Yeah, but 2,2 is definitely in the feasible region. If you draw it to scale, you'll be able to see that it's within the feasible region. Next, we might have 3. If you go to 3, right? 3,0. Only 3,0 is actually matching in this case. Yeah, reason why I'm saying this is that 3,1 is not within the feasible region, because if I draw this line here from 3, it's stepping out, and then as it touches 1, it's actually going out. So 3,1 is not a feasible point according to integer programming, but 3,0 is definitely in our feasible region, and we'll take note of that. So according to enumeration, that's how we just pick points. That's all. Yeah. So you also test again the z values of all these coordinates you have picked. Enumeration picks a number of coordinates, but the whole point is, what are we doing? Are we maximizing or minimizing? As I said, in this question we are maximizing. So you test out all these coordinates, and you tell me that this last coordinate that you picked, 3,0, it's the one that's producing the highest z value. And the rule is that z value should come out should be what? An integer. And if you test that out, you'll find that z will be equal to 9 with 3,0 as a testing point. And that's all. Just like that, then you're done with the enumeration. So that's just one method of solving integer programming after you've studied like a normal linear programming question. We can carry on to the next method, which is what they call branch and bound. It's just another approach. If you haven't used enumeration, you can also use branch and bound. Most of the time, it should lead you to the same outcome, yeah, as enumeration. Yeah, so if we look at branch and bound now. So branch and bound as well, it also does relate to this graph. I'll be explaining as we move for branch and bound. So what's going to happen for branch and bound is as follows. These are the rules. So branch and bound, the first branch, which can be either a circle or a box, it's up to what you would like yourself to draw. Yeah, I prefer boxes. And then you start like that. So okay, so if you look at we said it starts from your optimal solution according to the graphical method. If you check the graphical method we solved, our optimal solution was where x1 was 3.33 and our x2 was 0. That was our optimal solution. And what was our z value there? 9.99. Yeah, it was like also a recurring 9, but we just ended there on 2 decimal places. So if you do that now, your branch and bound, as we said, begins from your optimal solution according to the graphical method. So you would have a, should I say, a box drawn. So in your box, you can put your x1, the x1 value, which was, as we said, 3.33. So let me write these values in advance. X1, 3.33. You have your next values, x2, which was 0. This is as per optimal. Remember, as per optimal solution of the graphical. So from this now, your branch can start. Your branch and bound method can start. So how do you branch off? That's just the trick. How do you branch off? You branch off from the number, the variable that creates the branch is the one that is not an integer in that box, the first box. So if you look at this first box there, which one is not an integer? Excluding the z. Z is just like the optimal testing. Do not look at z at this point. If you look at x1 and x2, which of these two is not an integer? Definitely it's x1, because we said an integer is a whole number. So 0 does qualify actually. So the next one, x1, is not an integer, and thus we branch off just like that. So always you would be wondering, why have we got two branches instead of just having one branch? So the reason why we have two branches is that this is where now in every branch there are two bounds, and that's why the name in fact comes from. We have a branch and then bounds are there as well. So it's like we've branched off and then we'll have some bounds on each branch. So it's like each branch has a bound of the given should I say variable that we have branched off, which in this case is x1. So if you look at x1, it's 3.33, right? So you have to, what we do is that we ask ourselves, after we have branched this x1 off, we ask ourselves, which two numbers, if you look at the upper and lower side of this number, are integers? So if you look at 3.33, if you look at the lower bound of 3.33, what number could be there? And it should be an integer. So it's only 3, because 3 is below 3.33, yes, and it does qualify to be an integer number. How about the upper side of this number? It's 4. So again, whenever you're branching off, remember this rule. We look at like when we get that same number 3.33, we look at the lower bound of it and the upper bound of it, and those lower and upper bounds should be integer values. So if you look at 3.33, the lower side, that could be an integer. The closest integer to it is 3, and the upper bound that is closest to 3.33 is 4. And that's how we branch off, and we even put the bounds here. So on this branch we'll have x1. I'll explain these signs very soon. And then we said the other upper bound this side is 4, right? Now the question is, why do we put greater than? Why do we put less than? The reason is that we said 4 is the upper bound, right? Which is the closest integer to that number, 3.33. We put greater than on the upper bound because if we look at, we have this range 3 to 4. So if we put, for example, we said less than, right? Less than 4. And between this range of 3 to 4, do you think we'll be following that rule of integers? No, we'll end up getting like still more numbers, like in decimal 3.33, because this is our range. And then if you said less than 4, you'll be like, you're taking yourself back to decimals. You're no longer following that rule of integers. That's why we say greater than but equal to 4, meaning any numbers that come after 4 will qualify as integers. But if we go back to between 3 and 4, between 3 and 4 there are no integers, there are only what? Decimal numbers. That's why we do not put that sign. The other side, we've put less than but equal to 3 on the lower bound. Again, why don't we put greater than but equal to 3? Reason being is that we can also not find an integer that is greater than 3, but again the range is up to 4. Then again, as we said, we are violating that rule of integers. That's why the bounds have these symbols. So if you want, you can just remember this for the sake of not getting confused. On the lower bound, we usually put less than but equal to. On the upper bound, we put greater than but equal to. Yeah, then the next rule is we've branched off, right? Those are your two bounds. So once you've branched off your two bounds, you create another box, another box as well. It comes just there. So this new box that you're creating, it like retakes new values of x1 and x2. How do we do that? You have your optimal solution. Take that in mind now. You have your optimal solution, the one we graphed earlier on. If you rewind in this video, you will find that optimal solution of the graph. You go back to your graph. Then this point x1 is less than but equal to 3, right? Take this point to your graph and you graph it. Okay, I'll be erasing some things just for the sake of space. I want you to picture all these things that I'm talking about. If we do that, there we had this graph like this. If you remember, this was a 2 points, 2 points. This other one was a recurring 3.33. Yeah, now we want to come and take this new point of x1 is less than but equal to 3. We graph it as well. So you notice that if you graph that point, it comes out like this. x1 is less than but equal to 3. You've graphed it up. Then the next question you ask yourself is that, is this point within the feasible region? Definitely. Why? If you check, x1 is what? Less than but equal to 3. Feasible region, the furthest point it goes on the x1 axis is 3.33. So definitely this 3 is part and parcel of our feasible region. Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll make a continuation of this same video and finish off the branch and bound.